So, all right. We are recording, so just know that you are on. I'm gonna hide you. Okay. So, what we're going to do is basically a color harmonies assignment, and it will culminate in the creation of 20 collages. Um, Essentially, color harmonies are the kind of make it or break it factor in your career as a visual artist. If you don't understand color harmonies, you are really, beyond at a disadvantage. This is sort of inherently the makeup of the visual arts in terms of success is color. So ultimately, my color class, as well as other color classes that are taught across the United States, are based off of this guy named David Hornung. If any of you become art educators down the line, maybe become an art teacher, you want to invest in this book. David Hornung is the sort of end-all say-all in the course for color theory. And he does almost everything with basically color swatches and collage. He's actually based out of the Hudson River Valley, believe it or not, and that is new information to me, but I'm very excited to hopefully meet him one day. But it's a book that you can buy. What we're going to do is this assignment will essentially loop in a lot of different things. There will be some research on your part that will require you go into some websites of museums. I've listed a few here. And don't fret if you don't get all this down. I will share the PDF of this very PowerPoint up on the Google Classroom, just so you know. All right, so we're going to ask a series of questions throughout this assignment. What does value refer to in art and design, meaning tone, right? What does contrast refer to in terms of value? And how do they play a role in each other? What is high key value range versus low key value range? And I'll review these as we go on in the slides. And what are some formal and expressive implications of using a particular value range? Like, what actually happens when you indicate a very, very high range versus something with a very, very low range of light and dark? Ignore that little comment after that. What else do I have? What does saturation refer to in art and design regarding color? And what does it do, right? How can a color actually be desaturated? Muted is another word for that. And then why would an artist or designer want to vary the saturation levels of an artwork or design? And to what purpose, right? What does it actually do to your viewer? What do they think? What do they feel? What does it elicit typically? So if we're going to review, and this is where you really want to take those notes, guys. If we're going to review, this is essentially muted color. We have two images that are very close to each other in terms of their color palette. We have an abstract version with a very limited tonal arrangement here. And if you squint your eyes at the image on the right, you see hardly any variation of the light and darks. They're almost all light. That is a limited value range. It's also known as a high key value range because they're almost all on the light side of the value scale. The image on the left, however, is also made of muted color. So all of them are like dirty or add a little bit of white in them, or they're neutral grays, so a very similar color palette. However, it varies from the image on the right because everything in that landscape or in that seascape is a full value range. We go from black all the way to white. So just make sure that, I have to admit somebody. Just make sure that when you start this assignment, you know the clear difference between neutral colors and a full value range versus a limited value range. So we have two types of tones. We have a chromatic tone or a colored tone. Okay, anytime you see chromatic, it is colored. So it can be like a brown or like a very, red gray, right? But an achromatic tone has zero color in it. Know the difference. An achromatic color or tone is simply black and white. No other colors are ever mixed. So know the difference. A gray that is chromatic is very, very different than a gray that is achromatic. And hopefully you learned that from the last assignment. So this is just review. A monochromatic color range here. So what we have here is just a whole still I've painted with white, black, and phthalo blue. And phthalo blue is like an electric blue. You get a lot of tonal modalities within this expression. You get a full value range if you want it, but all of them live on the chromatic part of the color wheel, right? They are colored grays. So that is a muted image that has still a lot of value, a full value range, but muted color. So there is inherent value to all color. So if I am going to take a Xerox copy of the color wheel, all of those colors have a very distinctive value to them. So you have to learn to recognize them. Know that blue and purple are going to sit on the darker side than yellow and orange, right? Which is kind of obvious. What we have here is a painting done in high chroma. So what does chroma mean? If you don't know it, write it down. Chroma means high and pure color, okay? Pure. Nothing is desaturated, nothing is muted, nothing is made into a tint. Everything is very, very pure. So high chroma. Additionally, this image also has a full value range, which is why I've included the little black and white value range at the bottom of the screen. So that is a value scale. Hopefully you've had drawing one before, but if you haven't, one of the first things that you'll do is you'll deal with the value scale. And the value scale will be generally 9 values, all the shades going all the way up from white to black. So this image has a full value range going from black all the way to the white area. It doesn't mean it has black and white in it. It means that all of the color in it has a full value range. Any questions so far? Great. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I feel like I missed a couple of like things what the exact definition of things were. Like, so what's so one thing is like what's full value range?
Yeah. Full value range is, see this value scale at the bottom here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A full value range means that that there is light and dark and everything in between in your image. So this image, so if you're looking at my cursor here, you all see my cursor. We have some very, very light colors. You see those? That if I were to take a black and white photo of that would be on the very, very high end of this value scale. And we have some very, very dark values, right? And we have everything in between. Red would be maybe a number 5. This orange here would maybe be number 4. The lighter orange would maybe be number 3, okay? So if I were to take a black and white photo of this very painting, it would all be there on this value range. So full value range means it has the whole value range evident. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So value, just as a reminder from a few lectures ago, value just refers to the lightness and darkness of a thing. Yeah? And if it says full range of value, it means it's varied. If it's a limited range of value, which I believe I have in the next slide, but I don't remember, haven't memorized it. If it's a limited value range, it's only one side of the value scale, like maybe 1 to 5 or 5 to 9. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so what I've got here is I've got a Degas drawing of a dancer, and then we've put it into black and white. And you see that when you put it into black and white, we have white, we have black, and then we have all the grays in between. So this image could be called a full value range because it has everything in that value range down at the bottom. Make sense? So, good. So a limited value range, and remember a limited value range only has one section of the value scale indicated, right? One section all close to each other. So a limited value range could be evident in either one of these. In this image, They're all very high key. So high key means maybe 1 to 5 in the value range. And then low key, which is over here to the right, is from maybe 5 to number 9. It's all darks in the value scale. You don't have any real whites present. I don't know why I said president. But all you have are just simply darks. So this is a limited value range. Does that make sense? One being high key value range and one being low key value range. High key being the highest part of the value scale, meaning 1 to 5. Low key over here being 5 to 9. So just as a bit of a review, in order to get neutrals, you can do them in a couple of ways. One of which, in order to mix a neutral, and most of you learned this on the last assignment, and this, of course, is a high chroma, pure color wheel that we see over to the right. Over to the left, we see chromatic grays, or neutrals, near neutrals we'll call them, because they're slightly tinted, right? So when we take two complementary colors, and here we have orange, and then we have this sort of purpley color over here, so, I'm sorry, it's blue, orange and blue, when we mix them in equal amounts, so this is orange mixed with a tiny little bit of blue, a little bit more, all the way into the middle there, our attempt is to get something that is mostly an achromatic gray. It's still kind of a colored gray, but for the most part, it's an achromatic gray, so without color. The idea is that they cancel each other out. But the way to mute a color is simply to add a little bit of its complement. So this is a muted color. This is also still a muted color, this chromatic gray here, because it mutes the orange. It ceases to be pure. It ceases to be chromatic. Got it? So I've got a range of images that I pulled into a slide here, and I'll quiz you. So I need you to unmute yourself, and I want you to chime in, okay? So if I'm thinking about value, and you all see my cursor, if I'm thinking about value, which is the light and dark, would you all say that this image that I'm circling, which is a Giorgio Morandi still life painting, is it a full value range or a limited value range?
Limited value?
Absolutely. And would you say it falls on the light side of the value scale or the dark one?
Light.
Good. Now, it would probably be between 1 and 5, right? So, could you call this a high chroma image or a highly colored image, or would you call this a muted image?
Muted.
Good. Excellent.
Muted.
Excellent. So let's look at the other landscape over here. I'm circling here. All right. Now, using that vocabulary, how would you describe this one? Is it the same thing or is it a little bit different?
Say the same.
It's close. How is it a little bit different though?
A little more colorful.
Yeah? One more thing. Would you call this a dark right here and right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that dark exist over here? No.
Oh.
So would you call this a fuller value range than this one? Yeah, absolutely. It's not a complete full value range, but it is a fuller value range than this one for sure. So it's very similar. It's still muted, very neutral in color. Nothing's very pure. Almost everything has white in it or gray in it, right? Now this one's different. Is this one high key or low key?
Low key?
Good. And what makes it low key?
It's towards the darker part of the value scale.
Bingo. Good. Excellent. So we won't waste time on that one. It does have like 2 little lights in it, but I'm not going to count that. We'll talk about the predominant thing that exists in the image. All right. Would you call, everyone see what I'm circling here? This one right here in the lower right-hand corner. Would you call this, what would you call it? Oh, sorry. The qualms of online teaching. Would you call this image a high chroma image or a muted image?
High chroma.
Yeah, high chroma. And what does chroma mean again? Remind me.
Saturated.
Good. Excellent. And pure. Pure. Okay? All right. So we've got two images, and I've got them right next to each other. This woman's head, and then this abstract image over here. So two different images. One is chromatic, and one is achromatic. Which one is chromatic?
The one on the left.
Good. The one on the left. And why?
Because it has like a little bit of color in it, like a little bit of like orange to make that tan.
Good. Excellent. Would you call both of them a full range of value? Anybody?
No.
Yeah.
Sure about that?
No.
Why?
I think somebody just said yeah.
Somebody did say yeah. What do you think? Is it a full range? Okay, so full range. White, black, and grays in between. Do both of them have that?
Yes.
Yes, they sure do. Yes, they have more black and white than probably anything else, but the grays definitely are there. Okay? All right, we got some tricky ones over here. We've got this Picasso image that I'm circling right now. Give me some words to describe it that I'm not going to give you. You tell me what it is.
Full color range.
Full color.
Okay? Definitely.
Full color.
Full color range. What else?
Muted.
Definitely muted. So you can still have a full color range with muted color. Does that make sense, y'all?
Yes.
So you,
I'm a little confused on it a little bit.
okay. So I wouldn't call, so this image is very different than this image because this image at the lower right-hand corner is all pure colors. So that's high chroma. This image, although it's still muted, you see that white is almost added to every color. It still has a diverse color arrangement. Yellow, green, blue, red. So because it has that diverse color range, it makes it a wide color range, but it doesn't necessarily make it a high chroma image or high in hue. So no pure color actually exists. Does pure color exist over here? To the far left?
Yes.
Absolutely. Would we call that, high key, low key, or full value range?
We come out the same picture.
No, we're talking about the one to the far, far left here with the dots and the woman's face. High key, low key, or full value range?
Low key.
I would say low key. But I would say there's still high key parts in it because, like, you see the red, you see the yellow, and then the blue.
So this is a tricky one, right? We don't see like even grays in this at all. We see dots that are meant to suggest a value, right? So it also has pure color in it, but the issue is it's primaries, and primaries don't tell us a full story sometimes. So the black does seem to dominate. I would still call this a full value range, though, believe it or not, because it has white, black, and tones in between. Now, just reminding you, when you're asking yourself about a value range, you have to ask yourself, what would happen if I took a Xerox copy of this in black and white? And if I took a Xerox copy of this in black and white, all those little dots would mix together in my eye, right? So because of that, it can get a little tricky, but good. I'm happy with how you guys did. Good. Excellent. Okay. So just to review, muted colors refer to all colors that have low saturation or chroma. All right? These are subtle colors that have been dulled or grayed. The opposite of a soft color is a bright, vivid, saturated color. So there's high saturation and low saturation. Got it? High chroma is saturation. Then we have color saturation referring to something like intensity. So as the saturation increases, the color seems to be more pure. So a highly saturated image has vivid, rich, and bright colors, while an image with low saturation will oftentimes veer towards a scale of gray. Okay? All right. So I've got hue. Hue is the name of a pure color, such as red, blue, or yellow, right? It can be also green or blue. Value is just referring to the lightness or darkness of a color. And then we have one term that's going to be brand new to this. It's experimental paint application. And what is that? That basically means that you're putting paint on in a way that isn't traditional or standard. Anything that doesn't involve the traditional use of a brush. So it could mean that you put paint on your palette and you stick your paper on it. It could mean that you use a roller. It could mean you use a toothbrush. But you're just not using the traditional method of I mix the paint and I apply it with my paintbrush. Is everybody clear on that? Okay,
Yes.
great. So we're gonna work in collage, and I'm gonna ask that you actually paint your paper before cutting it up. Traditionally in color theory classes, and I've had students do this, but it's way too expensive. There's this whole packet called Color Aid, and it's like $300 for a bunch of colored paper, and I don't believe in it at all. It's far cheaper to just paint the colors yourself. And so what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna paint flat color. Now, I'm gonna repeat that. Flat color, paint flat color for the majority of these collages. And the flat color will be used as the distinguished predominant shape after you cut them up and apply. So, all right, the first part of this is basically you're going to want to follow a couple of rules. Each collage that we make will be 5 inches by 7 inches, okay? You're going to leave a border on those collages, meaning you're going to have to use your tape, right? And your artist's tape, basically you can just put it down before you actually no, you don't need to use your tape. Hold on just a second. You will need to put your collage down on a large enough sheet of white paper to leave a border. So, sorry, I misspoke there. So 5 by 7 in total size with a small border, okay? It can be, any of these can be non-objective or abstract. They don't have to be representational. In fact, I encourage you to avoid anything that's representational. It is a face. It is a bird. I would avoid that at all costs, to be perfectly honest with you. If you want ease and time without going crazy, I would like you to focus exclusively on color. I want you to use 6 to 9 shapes and 6 to 9 color mixtures for each collage. All right, take a picture of this if you need, but like I said, I'm going to put the PDF up. You're going to use the specified levels of value and saturation. That will be the majority of your grades on these. So I will tell you what kind of value and what kind of saturation level we'll have for each one. So that's why I wanted to drill it into you. It needs to be finished with a consistent border, so each one needs to be the same in terms of the border. You can just cut it down and mount it, spray mount it with your spray adhesive onto a white piece of paper if you prefer, but remember the final size is 5 by 7 each. Ignore this part. This actually comes into play later, so ignore that. Ignore that, ignore that, ignore that. You need to label them with your name, and this is just for the back, please, which is really unnecessary for an online class. And it's got to be mounted to a white border. Do not use black. Do not use any other color. You're going to be working with acrylic on Bristol. So you're going to be basically painting on your Bristol in various shapes or whatever. You're going to cut them out with either your scissors or your X-Acto knife. And then you're going to assemble them or reassemble them as a collage in the specifics that I will give you. Okay? Questions so far before we move on? No? All right. I'm sure you'll have some in the end, so no problem. These can be done in a sketchbook. I think that provided you use enough glue and you flatten them with maybe a book after, they can be done and then cut out and remounted onto a white sheet of paper, but I do not want your final product to be presented in a sketchbook. Does everybody understand that? Yay. Okay. So you'll notice here that this artist is pretty much taking the same composition for each one. You do not have to do that. You can do a different composition for each one. The very last one is incomplete, just so you know. But they have basically written down their colors just as notes to themselves, but this is just an example of sort of what it may look like, but as we go. All right, so the purpose of this exercise is to isolate the visual element of value. for the exercise 1. And at the very end, I'll have a whole slide of all of the different components, so don't freak out as I read this to you. So the first 2 collages that you're going to do is essentially achromatic, okay? So I've got a collage warm-up for set 1, achromatic, black, white, and gray. And what is achromatic? Black and white. And then the grays, no color. So you're going to create 2 collages using 6 to 9 shapes, working with a completely achromatic palette. You'll start by painting the swatches using white and black and mixing grays, light to dark from the tube. You will need to show a range of 6 to 9 different values in order to work with. So the very first, and everything in red here is what you'll be required. So the very first 2 things that you'll do, so your first 2 collages, the first one will have a broad value range, and the second one will narrow. So it could be high key or low key. But it needs to be completely achromatic, so no color at all. Then the next warm-up set is going to be monochromatic, meaning 1 color plus black and white. Okay? So you'd be creating 2 collages using 6 to 9 shapes, working with a monochromatic palette. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Same difference, it's just you're using 1 color for this one. The first one needs to have a broad value range, and the second one needs to have a narrow value range. All right, so that's the first 4 collages. Here are examples of those 2 assignments. The first one is completely achromatic with a narrow value range, so it's mostly on the light end of the spectrum of the value range, so 1 to 5 or so. And then this one, and we'll move this so we can see it, this one over here is the monochromatic one with a narrow value range, so we don't see a lot of lights and darks, we only see mostly lights. Does that make sense? All right. When we move up and we're evolving, what you'll do is you'll start to create some color swatches in your little studio, right? So you're using you can basically just sort of sit down and make a bunch of colors if you like, but you're aiming for mixtures based on 6 to 9 hues, okay? So mix a range of saturation levels, some prismatic or colored, or high intensity color. You want some muted ones, you want some shades, and you want some chromatic neutrals, all right? So you're gonna mix a bunch of colors, and you're gonna paint them on your Bristol board or just white paper, whatever, Bristol board's best, and apply the paint flatly and evenly until it's set, okay? The final set will require research to find your color palette, so wait to make those swatches until you get to that part of the project, okay? All right, so hold on, let me take a drink. All right, then you'll do what's called color sorting. And all of these things are a part of the design practice, so they are terms that we all use in the field, okay? So they're good things to memorize. So color sorting is, okay, you take each set and they'll indicate the value range and saturation levels that you need, all right? So I will provide those to you. I'll say high value range, chromatic grays, right? So you'll sort your swatches into saturation levels, and I would probably recommend that you organize those into little baggies or envelopes, whatever. Just keep them separate, all right? And then you can just pull from those as you need it. So part of the design practice and part of me teaching you this class is not just color theory, it's teaching you good practice for the studio that makes sense. And there's a phrase in cooking called mise en place. It's a French phrase that means everything in its place. And almost every single artist does not work in a space of chaos. So color sorting is actually there to kind of teach you good habits, okay? Then what you're going to do is in your sketchbook, you're going to work little thumbnails in there to figure out your compositions, what you're going to do in terms of shapes, how you're going to organize your picture plane, right? Is it going to be geometric shapes? Is it going to be organic? Okay, so you can use those sketches just as a sort of basis for your compositions as you move forward, okay? So make sure that you do a couple of things when you're sketching these little thumbnails. And I will actually give you a lecture on composition next week, so sit tight for that, but you'll learn a lot. You want to make sure that you incorporate a variety of small, medium, and large shapes within each composition. don't always use the same shape and don't always use the same size, okay? So think about all the elements of design that you've learned thus far, and then think about applying them. So you can repeat each composition for each set, but I've told you you also don't have to do that. So you can have a new composition for each one as well. Just make sure that they sort of relate in a familial way. What do I mean by that? They all kind of look like they were done by the same artist. But if they, if this veers away from that, I'm not going to lose my mind, okay? All right, then you're going to actually construct the collages. So you're going to use the paint swatches after you've cut them out into shapes. And after you've organized and made sure that you're using the absolute correct value and color arrangements, you're going to cut them up. You can modify your designs from your initial sketches. I don't care. And then you're going to glue them down to your picture plane. And remember that your picture plane is under 5 inches by 7 inches, and always allow room for a border, okay? So spend some time arranging and rearranging your cutout shapes until you arrive at something that feels good and balanced, okay? And that will be intuitive for most of you. So try several variations before you actually glue something down. All right. So this is an example of everything you'll be responsible for, all 20 collages. And I'll have this as part of the PDF as well that I'll share on the Google Classroom. And this is an example of a student work. So that you see the student is taking great pains to be clean, to cut out clear shapes with consideration. They are adhering to my my exercise prompt. So let's try to find one. Let's look at set 2. This is 2 separate collages. One has a broad value range and a broad hue range or color range. So lots of value, lots of color. Which one might that be? Let's see, this one? I think that's probably it. Broad value, so we got dark, we got light, and then we got everything in between. And then we've also got a broad color range as well, so broad hue range. Very pure. So that one could exist for that one as well, even though it might tick a few boxes elsewhere. So each separate set, so the exercises are also a set, will be split up into 2, and I'll provide those due dates for you at the end of the lecture. So, we all now know what a broad value range is with combined saturation. What is combined saturation? Well, that means there can be really, really pure color with neutral colors. So that's a combined saturation level. Prismatic refers to high color, okay? Muted refers to things that incorporate only white. So this one is muted and this one is muted. So these 2 probably go together, and it is the broad value range here and then the narrow value range here. So this one's high key with a narrow value range, and this one's a high range of value that has light, dark, and everything in between, and both use muted colors. Questions so far?
Something I'm curious about is I know for the project you told us not to be representational. So I guess how we know, especially if we're not used to doing abstract stuff, how we know what shapes to create, what our image will be for the shape we make and the composition for the artwork.
That's a great question. That is a complicated answer, though. Intuition to start. What do you doodle when you doodle abstract things? If you're really uncomfortable with it, very simple geometric shapes is where I would start, because these may start out very simple for you and they may get more complicated as you make them, which in all probability is likely. Another option is to actually look at abstract art, look at geometric abstract art, Google it, look at other artists. A big part of our expectations in the field in order to be new, to make new stuff and interesting stuff, is to know what came before us. So I would highly recommend that you start searching on the internet for abstract art and start looking at the shapes that they create and steal them. Great art is stolen art. I would not steal something directly, but what I would do is definitely use a kind of, we call it like an image bank, where you save a bunch of images that you like onto maybe a folder on your computer, and you use those shapes as your bank to pull from. So those are a couple ways to do that, but there's not a simple answer. But most of us just look at others' art, right? If we're going to make an abstract image, typically. Does that answer your question, kind of?
I'd say so, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Start sketching, though. It really is the sketchbook will play a big role in this. And yeah.
I have a question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So, we're supposed to be like doing 20 collages total?
You will, in 4 weeks' time, have 20 of them down. I haven't shown you the whole PowerPoint yet, so I haven't showed you the breakdown of when each section is due. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and my other question is, can we do the same image for all 20 or no?
If you want to, you can. You might get bored to tears, though.
Okay.
Okay? So, warning there, all right? All right, let's count. This isn't actually all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's actually more. So let's look at what those are. Oh, here's another student example. Okay? And at the end, you'll shoot them all together. You'll photograph them all together. But this is also not all of them as well. So hold on just a second. So some more examples. Here's the muted color with narrow value and a broad hue. Broad hue means differing colors. So we got red, yellow, cream, green. And then, of course, chromatic neutral, which means each color has been neutralized slightly by either adding gray to it or its complement. Chromatic neutral. And it's got a narrow value range and a broad hue. So we do have brown, purple, and blue. So it does have a diverse color arrangement. Everybody following? Some more examples. Chromatic neutral, what does that mean? That means colored neutrals or colored grays with a narrow value range and a broad hue. So broad hue meaning color, right? Purple, dark purple, green, light green, and then this copper color. So that's broad color because they're all different colors, right? Then we have combined saturation. So we have very, very bright. So we have this lime green with this bright orange. And then we have low saturation where we have this brown and then this sort of chromatic purple gray here. So that's combined saturation with a broad value range. So we have light, dark, and everything in between. And then we have a broad hue. So orange, green, gray, purple, right? Or brown, whatever that is. So just kind of reinforcing what the expectations are, all right? This one's a really fun composition, chromatic neutral, so everything's been neutralized by either adding gray or adding its complement. It has a broad value range, and it has a broad hue, all right? Combined saturation, so bright as well as neutral. So a way to make something neutral is to also make it a tint, right here. This is also a little bit neutralized. This blue has a little bit of orange in it in order to make it darker. And then it has a broad hue. All right, another student example. And this is all of them. So you see, when you're thinking about like just shapes, you're thinking, oh, I need a round lumpy shape versus I need, some geometric hard edge shapes. I need a rhomboid. I need a triangle, right? But you can also think about the world around you in terms of abstraction. This looks a lot like a tentacle, right? And it goes off into space. These are particularly lovely, clean examples. All right, some more examples. All right. So we're going to review how to do these things again. All right. Do some research to get your ideas. Refer to the abstract painters in the PowerPoint for design inspiration. And use simplified versions of existing compositions. Basically, you can look at any museum. The Museum of Modern Art is an excellent place to start if you're wanting to look at artists. Prismatic hues will be pure and will require you to consider the inherent value of a color. So prismatic hue, say it's an orange, is going to probably be a fairly light color in terms of value. So the more you mix something, the more colors you put in something, the more saturation decreases. So if you add 3 colors to something, you can pretty much bank it's going to be a chromatic neutral, right? The best way to muddy up a color is to add more than 3, okay? All right, there are a couple ways to mute a color. You can add white to it to make it a tint. You can add black to it to make it a shade, okay? You can add a little of its complement, or you can add just black and white as a gray, okay? So those are 4 ways to mute a color. Memorize them, all right? Muted colors still maintain much of the hue, so you can still tell it's a purple gray, right? But the saturation is decreased slightly, so, but not so much that it becomes neutral, all right? All right, there are a couple ways to mix a chromatic neutral. So basically the same idea as muting a color. You can either add the color's complement enough to make the color read as neutral, so you're adding almost exactly the same amount of color. So you add the exact same amount of orange as you do blue, which is the complement, so that it sits right in the middle. So it's going to read as colorless as possible. You want to kind of cancel them out whenever you see the term chromatic neutral. Write that down. You want to cancel out the color whenever you see the word chromatic neutral. So you're adding the complement until it really seems to cancel each other out, but it will lean on one side or the other in terms of its color bias. So it'll still be orangey or it'll still be bluey, all right? The other way to do it is just simply add gray to the color, so black and white, but don't be lazy. Start getting used to actually adding the complement. All right, if you add a gray that is of the same value as the color, the value of the new mixture will typically stay the same. If you add a complement, the value of the new mixture will depend on the value of the color that you add. All right, that's a lot of words. Here's more words. The final 6 the final 6 collages will require you to do a little bit of research online. All right, so I've got some lists of various museums that would really be in your benefit to look at. And what you're going to do is you're going to choose 6 paintings from 6 different time periods, and I've listed them down below here, to create 6 new compositions. All right? So here's what you're going to do. You are going to find a painting from art history, looking online at the various art museums that exist from 1100 to 1350, right? Maybe start with the medieval era in Italy, right, for that. After you do that, you're going to match 6 to 9 of the colors in the painting itself, and I'll show you examples, but you're going to match 6 to 9 of those colors flatly, okay? So the major dominant colors. And then you're going to reassemble that image using either abstract compositions or representational. It's really up to you. So you're going to basically take a painting from art history, use its color palette, and then make your own collage from that. Does that make sense? So here's an example. You can make it representational. This artist has chosen to make it representational. But what they've done is they've made what's called a color inventory. And this won't be the last time you hear the word color inventory, trust me. We're going to do a whole assignment about it, where we kind of recreate a masterwork. But what they've done is they pulled the color, and I'm sorry I don't have the original image that they pulled from here, but you will need to source it, so you will need to make sure that you save the images that you take from the original paintings from art history. And then you're going to make like colors from them that are essentially just pulled from the dominant color arrangement that that artist chose. And then you can remake your collage any which way that you'd like to. So you will need to label. So provide the following information. Basically, when you turn in, you'll need this. A little tab or a little post-it note would be fine. The name of the museum, the name of the artist, the title of the painting, and the date. And then I won't actually make you provide a Word document at all. But basically, you'll need to post your image that you took from as well as the collage itself. And I'll tell you how to do that later in on this, because remember, it's a month. So in total, you'll have 20 collage compositions. So these are all of them listed on one single page. Take a picture of this if you need to. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So the first part of this in red is due on September 28th. That's 2 weeks. And these collages won't take that long. Your painting will probably take a lot longer than actually making collages. If you've ever made a collage, they go really quickly. So this may seem daunting, but believe it or not, it's fairly quick. And then the second set, all these in green, will be due October 12th. And at that point in October 12th, you'll have the 20 complete, and so I'll ask that you take a full picture of all of them, and then I'll be very specific about how you label them for turn-in. So that will be that. Did everybody get a picture of this? Okay.
Yep.
All right.